What's going on, guys? Dropaduski here. Today I want to talk about the Raekor HOTA Barb for patch 2.6.1 Diablo 3 for season 12. Now, I have already put out a guide for the IK HOTA Barb, the IK variation of this build. I will put a link in the description to that. Now, with the buffs that are coming to 2.6.1, the Raekor set was also buffed a little bit, and this variation of HOTA, in my opinion, feels like it's a lot more tanky, and I like the play style. It all synergizes around the convention of the elements and utilizing the fire rotation, and you do mega damage numbers. Now in the background you can see that I'm doing a GR 100. I will put this full clear at the end so that you can see the play style, and after we go over the gear and the abilities, I will discuss some of the intricacies and some of the things that I found while testing this. Big shout out to Nestle on stream for providing me the info for this build and letting me know about it so that I could test it on the live servers. So let's jump over to the gear and abilities. Now, with this setup, you are going to be utilizing the Raekor 6-piece, and we'll just look at this quickly. The 6-piece set bonus here: every use of Furious Charge increases the damage of your next Fury spending attack by 2,800%. This effect stacks. Every use of the Fury spending attack consumes 5 stacks. So as you could see in the previous run there, I was charging like crazy, right? You're charging like crazy, keeping things stunned, adding to the comment that I made about more survivability, and also gaining stacks so that when fire rotation rolls around on your Convention of the Elements, you can start going crazy with from the Hammer of the Ancients and do mega damage numbers. Your 3 priorities on stats are cooldown, area damage, and Hammer of the Ancients damage. So wherever you can get Hammer of the Ancients damage, I believe it's boots and helm, you're going to get Hammer of the Ancients damage there. You're going to go for, so your perfect Raekor shoulders would be area damage, cooldown, because you want cooldown so that you can keep Ignore Pain up as often as possible, and also have Wrath of the Berserker available as much as possible when you're running this build. So it's 6-piece Raekor setup with Hammer of the Ancients damage, cooldown damage, and area damage. For the jewelry slots, we're going to be using Convention of the Elements. Once again, your perfect Convention of the Elements would be crit cooldown or crit area. As long as you can get to that cooldown benchmark where you can keep IP up almost permanently, then I would switch over to area if you have that set up. And you can test that in town just by hitting IP, watching the duration of the ability, and then seeing how much cooldown you have left before you can cast it again. The other jewelry slots are a T-Pledge and Compass Rose, which give you even more survivability when you're sliding around, Furious Charging through the Grift, which gives you that 50% damage reduction while moving, and then when you stop to stand still and swing the hammer, that damage increase will rise. Even though the window of where you're doing damage is much lower than the amount of time it takes to get a full 100%, you still will benefit from the damage bonus of this when you're swinging the hammer. Once again, the ideal rolls on these would be crit cooldown or crit area damage. And also the elemental damage that you use for this build is fire. So you're going to want to fire, crit, Traveler's Pledge, and fire on your Bracers of the First Men. Speaking of bracers, you use Bracers of the First Men. Ideally, you're going to want a really high roll here. For this variation, compared to the IK, you want to cube the Bracers of the First Men, whereas with this one, you can wear them, and you want to get as close to that 500% mark on the damage bonus that comes with these bracers now, as this is one of the items that was buffed for 2.6.1. For the belt slot, you're going to be wearing the Pride of Cassius. Ideally, you want a 6-second one. I always tell people in stream that I will take a 6-second Pride of Cassius over an ancient 4-second Pride of Cassius. So you really want that 6-second duration, as that gives you the ability to roll less cooldown in your gear and go for more area damage in those slots. On the gloves here, I have crit cooldown. You could get a perfect pair that would be crit cooldown area damage, but that's going to require a lot of gear hunting. For the weapons here, we use Little Rogue and Slanderer, as it is the best way to get attack speed. For the Barbarian, we do this on the other HOTA variation as well. Your perfect weapons would be percent damage, area damage. There's multiple variations here. It's all dependent on that cooldown. So a lot of times I'll take cooldown on both weapons, so you could go for cooldown area damage. as your primary stats on the Little Rogue and Slanderers. So these ones aren't optimal as they have attack speed on them, but this one here, you see how I have percent damage, area damage, cooldown? That's just about a perfect weapon. If you could get 10% damage there, this would be great. I would roll off strength. If you get something, if you're lucky enough to get a weapon that has cooldown and area on it already, or cooldown and percent damage already, I would roll the strength off to get that third stat, and that would be the perfect Little Rogue or Slanderer. So now that we've covered all the gear, oh, also you're going to be using a white gem in the helm for cooldown as to get more Wrath of Berserker and more Ignore Pain, and white gems in your armor slots for that increased resistance, because even with the Barb changes for survivability, it's still really nice in the higher GRs. Let's go over the abilities quickly, and let's touch on the cube first. So in the cube, we have the Gavel of Judgment. Now the Gavel of Judgment was reworked for this current patch, 2.6.1. The damage of Hammer of the Ancients is increased by 800%, and it returns 25 Fury if it hits 3 or fewer enemies. With this variation, you're never out of Fury, because you're charging way more than you're using the hammer, and charge generates fury anyways, so you have no issue having enough fury to spam hammers when the fire rotation comes around on COE. The second slot in the cube is the Oculicurus. While above 90% primary resource, all damage taken is reduced by 50%. This, you almost have benefit from this buff the entire rift, as you very rarely ever dip below full fury while you're charging, as charge does generate fury, as I had just stated. So this is a very, very good buff for survivability, and one of the reasons that I feel that this build kind of stands out in regards to survivability versus the IK HOTA variation. And then the Band of Might. The Band of Might was buffed significantly for patch 2.6.1. After casting Furious Charge, Ground Stomp, or Lead, take 80% reduced damage for 8 seconds. This is a huge damage reduction buff, and will be utilized by almost all of the HOTA builds, or all of the Barbarian builds going forward for the season, other than Whirlwind. So now that we've gone through the cube and the abilities, let's go through the skills. We have Furious Charge, Merciless Assault I have selected, but as with the case set, you get every rune for Furious Charge, so you can take fire there as well, since fire is your elemental damage, and do a little bit more damage when you're charging. Hammer of the Ancients Smash. Now call forth a massive hammer to strike directly in front of you. Hammer of the Ancients has a 1% increased critical hit chance for every 5 fury that you have. So since you're almost always at 5 fury, this is the optimal ability for Hammer of the Ancients. It does so much damage. We use this for the HOTA variation as well, so you're going to want to keep this equipped as your primary damage output. Battle Rage Bloodshed, pretty much standard for all Barbarian damage builds and solo builds currently. Deal damage equal to 20% of your recent critical hits to enemies within 20 yards for 1 second. It's a very good ability. Ignore Pain, Ignorance is Bliss. I like to take Ignorance is Bliss here, as you gain life per fury spent. So when you're using your hammer, you have a little bit more damage reduction, as the damage reduction or I guess more life regen as the damage reduction dips from the T-Pledge Compass Rose armor stack that you get while you're moving around. You can also increase the duration here for 7 seconds and have no trouble keeping it up all the time. Mine does dip a little bit, but it hasn't been a problem with me thus far in pushing. Threatening Shout Demoralize. This is very good for using before you go into Hammer Super Saiyan mode, right? So you're going to be using this so that everything around you as you're charging is, coming together as your fire rotation comes around. You Threatening Shout, and it taunts everything back into you, right? Enemies affected are also taunted to attack you for 4 seconds, pulling them in closer, as when your hammers drop the big damage and the area damage procs, you want as many things as close to you as possible when you go into damage mode. And then Wrath of Berserker is Insanity, as it is the best rune for Wrath of Berserker. Critical hit chance up 10%, attack speed 25, dodge chance 20, movement speed. It's just an amazing, amazing ability for Barbarians. For the passives here, you can take Rampage, Ruthless, Berserker Rage, and then here, just as testing, I was taking Boonable Kathos, as I would get more Wrath of Berserkers, but ideally in a high push you're going to want to take Nerves of Steel here. Nerves of Steel will give you that, you know, oh shit passive, you know, it gives you an extra life so that you don't die and you can continue moving through the grift without deaths and increasing the death timer. So you can play with this in a lower, say, farm variation if you're playing solo and you're using this in order to gain paragons. I can take Woundable Kathos and not die at all, whereas in a higher push I like to take Nerves of Steel. So now that we've gone through all of the abilities and the gear, let's touch on the legendary gems as well. For the legendary gems here, you're going to be taking Esoteric Alteration for the non-physical damage reduction, and will below 50% life. Your resistances to cold, fire, lightning, and poison and arcane are increased by 75%. A very good gem for survivability. And then you'll be taking Bane of the Stricken for the boss fight, as it's standard for any push, and Bane of the Trapped, as it is a huge damage multiplier, and it procs itself once it's level 25. So those are the 3 gems. Now before I wrap up the video and throw you into the push that I did, I want to quickly cue something up and talk about a few of the intricacies that I've learned with this build. So if we just jump into a 95 here, I can show you quickly that one thing that I've learned, and one thing that I like to do when I play, and a lot of people like to do this as well, is I'll hold the shift bar so that I can stop and force attack. One issue that I've found with that for this variation of the Barbarian is a lot of times the hammers will miss when you do that, right? So what you want to do is kind of pinpoint where you want your hammers to go. Do not hold shift, come in and attack, right? So on the fire rotation, it'll blow everything up. That's the whole way that this build works. So you're going to get up to 200% from the Convention of the Elements, and all of these stacks, you see how I'm getting Furious Charge stacks there on my buff bar. I'm up to 16, 18, 20. For the 20, you know, you're going to burn through 5 stacks for every hammer that goes down. So when I say don't use shift, you really don't want those hammers to miss, right? Because every hammer you use, whether it hits or it doesn't hit, is going to expel one of those 5 stacks. So that's why I'm not using shift. I did run into that issue while I was running before, when I was doing my pushes on stream. So that's just one of my little tips for this build. Make sure that when you're going to use the hammer, it's very pinpointed and targeted, so that you do not waste a hammer, or potentially, you see how the stacks are gone? I just used the hammer and the stacks are gone. So whether you hit something or not, you're going to burn those stacks, and you're going to dump 5 stacks per hammer, increasing that damage and getting the buff from the Furious Charge set. So make sure that those hammers count. Other than that, I just want to do a big shout out to everybody that tunes into the stream. Let's do this real quick. We do wear the Viking helmet on stream, and everybody from stream and Twitch, thank you all so much for supporting the channel. We are over 17,000 followers on Twitch and climbing daily. We have a very active Discord and in-game community called Smoke Break on the North American server. Feel free to come by the Twitch channel anytime and chat with us. It's a lot of fun in there. You can get tips for Diablo 3 and or just hang out and have a good time, dude. The Twitch channel is twitch.tv/Dropaduski. Big shout out to all my YouTube subscribers. I know I've been a little quiet lately as I have been trying to figure out and learn and get these builds down for the guides that I want to put out. We're going to be putting out a bunch now going forward to season 12 and getting these things all worked out as I do work on them in stream and kind of learn how to play some of these builds before I come here, so I can give you the little tips and tricks like I did with the don't force attack with the Raekor HOTA Barb. So once again, thank you guys so much, and I'm going to go ahead and play the GR100 clear now. Guys, thank you, and good luck in season 12. Peace!